Hi everyone, today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We're going to go over how I like to design my pieces. As with everything when it comes to art, there's a million different ways to do things, and it's important for everyone to find the way that works best for them. I just wanted to share what works for me. The first thing we're going to do is kind of go over and show the back of these pieces so you can kind of get an idea of what framing looks like in wire wrapping. This always reminds me of that meme episode of The Simpsons where Homer's supposed to trying to be all sexy or whatever, and they pan to the back and he's got binder clips holding his back together and it looks ridiculous. That's what the back of a wire wrap always reminds me of. But I digress. Here we go. Okay, so with framing, it's always wanting to have a secure frame. So the outermost part is going to be your thickest wire. I typically use 16 gauge square wire for my main frame bodies. You can see it here, and this is just the outside edge. See it there, you can see it on this guy, and you can see it on this one here. So that's going to be the main body of your piece. It is going to be the structure, it's going to be the main shape. Okay, that's the best way to think of it, is the shape of the piece. It's going to follow this. Everything else is filling it in and accentuating it, because this or this or this isn't going to be a very attractive piece. From there, you will add your cross beams. Cross beams, I don't know what you want to call them. The wires that go across, and it's going to create more structural pieces so that this piece doesn't bend in or stretch out. It's going to hold it in the shape that you want it to in, and it's also going to create these places where you can connect your stone for the pressure fittings, you can connect your weaves, you can connect everything into the back of your piece so that it is nice and secure. So you can see here that I'm using these bars to hold the back of the stones in without creating a piece of metal that's holding everything down. These, again, you want them to be a stronger square wire, so 18 gauge is what I would recommend. Here I'm using 16 because this piece is not having a whole lot of stones going on, and they're all very, you can't see through them. This one is a little bit different, wherein I'm using a smaller gauge square wire and creating just pressure fittings to hold everything in place. And then here, it has very few of these cross sections because I'm using a very, very strong wire. Here I'm using, I think a 12 gauge wire. So it's not really gonna go anywhere. And so then, you'll just use that frame that you've created to add the elements that you have in your design. You can see that we've got our fan weaves, we've got a channel setting here, we've got the fern weave here. These are all things that we've kind of gone over, except for coiled coils. I figured that these are kind of self-explanatory. You coil one wire around all these, and then you coil this coil that you've made around another wire, and you go from there. We've got our spiral settings, we've got our channel settings, and then we have pressure settings, which are something that we'll go over here. Oh, and these little guys are all the little spiral settings too. So from here, we're going to look in my notebook and see a little bit more on how I create my pieces. I figured a good place to start would be with a piece that we have on hand and the design that I drew for the piece. So here you can see that I have clearly outlined the overall shape that I want my main frame to be, And these two little lines indicate where I want my bail to be placed so that I know how my piece will hang. Very important piece to make sure you're adding, because that's going to change a lot for your piece. Like this piece, I wouldn't be able to just hang in the middle. That would look silly. So I decided to create a chain to go with it. But on this one, we'll get back to what we were actually talking about. I have my main frame here, and then I wanted to make sure that all these stones that I want in my piece have a secure backing. So this main stone, it's got these two beams right here and here, close to the ends, so that you're not able to see through the stone and see the wires in the back. And then here I made sure to have at least 2 wires behind every stone to make sure that they are going to stay in place, and to make sure that I have enough space to do that. And then, because I knew that these lines were going to show up in the piece if I left them the way it was, I decided to add these little spirals to cover up those blank spaces that are going to be created from the inside of the sides of the stone not being fully connected. When designing jewelry, there is 2 methods that you can go with. You can go with a design base, and like this, where you have created a piece you really want to see to come to life, but you don't know what stones you're going to use when you draw your piece. This is where you'll have to try to find stones that will fit into the design. The other method that I use a lot is a stone-based piece, where I have a stone, I really want to work with it, but I'm not sure how I'm going to use it, and I just start designing from there. Because with a piece like this, I guess, or like this one, I can't start out with a stone that's this big and say, oh, I'm going to turn it into this pendant. No, that's not going to work, because then it's going to be huge and it's not going to actually be a piece. That's pretty obvious, I'm sure, to everybody watching this video. But it just needs to be stated that those are the 2 camps for designing jewelry, is either stone-based or design-based. And I'll show you some more pieces. You're gonna laugh at some of these doodles I have in here. So that's a bad example. Let me speed this up. This is a better example of a more stone-based design. So when I made this one, I had a piece of aquamarine. It was about this big, and I really wanted to use it in a piece, but I didn't want it to just be a simple coil wrap around a pendant, a point. So what I did was I first drew out the size of my stone, which is this big. Had a couple of ideas of how I could use it, and obviously some were things I decided against. Drew out the shape that I was really liking. I really wanted to do more of a diamond shaped piece with this one singular point. And then from there, started figuring out how I could pin that piece, the stone down, without making a huge mess of wires in and behind, around and behind the stone, because it was a piece of aquamarine, so it was very transparent. So I ran 2 bars back and forth behind the bottom, and then I had one that was on here. Let me get a pendant over here. So I had one that went out along the back here, and then one where I attached it on the other side. So instead of it being attached like this, it was attached more like this, so that it would hold the stone from sliding up and down. And then I ran 2 along the sides to keep it from going side to side. Then, because I had my initial framework out here, I was able to attach these pieces here, up here at the bail, and then on the sides here and here. And then these can coil in and out, and there was some smaller stones here, a channel setting here. And so once I could figure out and picture how I was going to do it on paper, it made it so that I could take my main frame and kind of go around and work around the sketch that I had so that I had my shape the way that I wanted it to. Here is another example of stone-based design. As a wire wrapper that was selling a lot of pieces, I had a lot of people that were showing up with stones that meant a lot to them, that they wanted me to turn into something for them so that they could wear it and have it close to them. It could be a stone that they found on a vacation, could be something that was gifted to them by a loved one. Doesn't really matter where the stone comes from, but it's something that they really care about, they want on their body as much as possible. So what I would do with that is, usually these stones, when they are from somebody requesting a custom, they are typically a larger stone. People don't really, once in a while they'll come in with a smaller stone, but usually it's a fairly large cabochon or something of that nature. And so just figuring out a good way to make the wires flow with the stone while also ensuring that it's going to stay where it needs to stay, not fall out, and look nice. These are all different ways. Like you can see, these are all pretty ovally. This one, it is an oval, but because of the way that I ran the wires, it turned it into more of a round shape. And then based on what you're capable of and what you're comfortable with, you can show these designs to the person that's wanting to get a custom done and go from there and see if that's what they are wanting. And if it's not something that they're comfortable, not something that they want, then you can either A, go back to the drawing board, or B, say it's not something you really want to do, because we all have our own styles, and it's important that you stick with what style is your favorite, because it is your art, your outlet, and it's important to make sure that you get to maintain that when you're doing any of your art, really. Okay, and then I will flip through, find some designs that are design based and show you how I map those out. Okay, I have a few different designs that I want to show you guys that are design based. The first one is these butterfly wings, and figuring out how to make the shapes that I know stones come in very commonly fit together and work together to create the design that I'm wanting to do. So a lot of these are the more pointy ovals. I guess they're like a marquee cut maybe, but not really a marquee cut because they're not a facet. And then circles, because we know that those are very common shapes. These oval ones, when I first started drawing it, much harder to come by. You find ovals, but you don't really find a lot of them in this oblong shape, but you will find a lot of these pointy boys. So when I was designing this piece, I thought about the stones that I could potentially use and their shapes. This little whale friend was one of my favorite pieces. So when designing him, again, I thought about what a whale looks like. Gonna need that. Pardon the little drawing my children made for me. What a whale typically looks like. They usually have these lines going along their belly. The shapes that you usually see in art is like kind of splayed out a little bit, like this guy. Didn't want to make that big of a piece. That's very large, very heavy, not gonna be something a lot of people want to wear. So I downsized him a bit and thought of what's gonna make it easier for me as a wire wrapper to fill the spaces that are going to be left in this piece easily and still look nice. Like, this is pretty simple. These are going to be just bare wires making this lines. But then I've got these fins, and a fin shape is going to be kind of difficult to fill with just straight wire, but I can always find a stone that's in an oval shape to put in there and then work my wires around. Fills up my space, looks nice, checks all the boxes. And then this one, Medusa, she's a really good example of, and same with this little monster man, a really good example of when designing, making sure that you're accounting for how you're going to attach everything in the back. Because, like, how are you going to attach a mouth if your frame wires are way out here? Well, you're going to have to make a smaller frame inside, right? How are you going to do that? Well, you're going to need to connect this side to this side, right? These two connections are going to need to be made so that you can run a wire up and down. Because otherwise you're running this wire up and down all the way through here. You're going to mess with other elements of your piece. So this one has the back wire shown here and here. And then we have these lines here and here so that I can connect not only the mouth, but also the nose and these design elements here and here for face structure. Because you're always filling the space. So if you can't connect the pieces that you need to fill the space, you can't fill the space. So this was a good example of showing how everything is going to get connected. Again, you can see that my frame is going up and along here. It's not going all, well, I guess I did draw it, going out like this, coming like this, and then going and following these lines till it comes to right here, and I have a little cross brace line right there to make my bail. And then everything's going to have a place to connect to. Yeah, so those are just some basic ways that I think about designing jewelry, how I connect things, how I plan things out, map out my pieces before I start to sit down and work on them. As I said at the beginning of the video, there is as many ways to design jewelry as there are jewelry makers. So if any of these tips or ideas or tricks have helped you, then awesome. If you think everything that I said today was stupid and you're never going to use any of them, thank you for hanging out and watching the video, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. If you want to see more content, feel free to like and subscribe. Bye.